is it you want, chickens or elephants?
With that?
The chickens or elephants that you love now?
I wanna grow my own duck. I gotta have at least one chicken, one duck.
Focus on what's
Take your
accessory or
own
residential.
Yeah.
Call to order.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, unless our YouTube videos are going viral, there's extra attendance. I think most of you are here to, or some of you are here to hear about the Bergson zoning text amendment. They asked to be taken off the agenda at the, earlier today, so we won't be officially discussing that. However, if you came to voice any concern or have anything to say about the plan, you know, we'd love to hear from you. Okay. No correspondence. We're gonna take a look at the meeting minutes from the last minute, from the last meeting.
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Right, under, there are no plan reviews today. Under other business, we have, Hillside Custom Machining direct zoning ordinance text amendment.
Good evening, members of the planning commission. My name is John Jarris. I represent 131 Quarry Road LLC, otherwise known as Hillside Custom Machining, Inc. To my right is Anthony Diver, also representing the project. My client currently owns and operates a facility here in the township at 131 Morgan Way. That facility consists of an existing 75,000 square foot building with associated parking. The property is located in both the I-2 and C3 zoning districts of the township, with the majority of the property, including the existing building, pretty much in the I-2 district. My client's seeking to expand its existing building by approximately 54,000 square feet, and that addition will protrude into the abutting C3 district. We have proposed a text amendment to your zoning ordinance at section 402, paragraph 9, which deals with district boundaries in the township, and to permit the extension of regulations for either a portion of the lot being 50 feet beyond the district line into the remaining portion, or expansion of existing building by no more than 25%, which we believe will accommodate the proposed expansion. So we're here this evening asking for a favorable recommendation on this proposed text amendment, and to authorize the text amendment to be sent to the County Planning Commission for review and comment. But we're here to answer any questions you may have. Whoever has a plan showing the building expansion, if there are any questions.
I reviewed the proposal, and I believe it's consistent with what you discussed with Hillside last month. So I really don't have anything to add. Terry, anything to say?
Yeah, it's really very simple.
the only change was basically expanding or allowing the building expansion up to 25%. And that's really the change. The 50-foot was already in the ordinance.
If nobody objects, then it would be appropriate to make a recommendation. I think you make a recommendation to approve the ordinance subject to the 30-day review by the planning commission. That way, if there's nothing substantive that the county planning commission has for you, they don't need to come back and revisit anything with you. They can just go in front of the board of supervisors today. If there's something substantive, then it would probably require a further discussion. So that would be my recommendation.
Have a motion for that?
I'll make a motion on that.
I'll second
It would be a recommendation to approve the ordinance subject to the county PC review.
Yes.
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much, we appreciate it.
Next was a review of the proposed zoning ordinance amendment to the farm animals. Good draft.
You guys have had this on your agenda for a few months now. I know Terry has circulated the first amendment, the zoning ordinance to address accessory uses in residential properties. I had shared with you a model ordinance concerning regulation of bees, beekeeping. So really, I don't know, Terry, do you have more to add, or are we really waiting for direction?
Really, yeah, I didn't get any comments from anybody about the existing ordinance, so, and it could be that everybody's super busy, so might not have really thought about it. And again, this is really up to you guys, whether you want to address this way. Right now, the zoning ordinance doesn't allow farm animals in residential property, or residential properties. So if someone wants to keep chickens, or somebody wants to keep ducks, or, they'd have to actually be in the R2 or the R1 or EAP zoning district in order to be able to, and have a property big enough to be able to qualify for an agricultural use. So,
What about if they, consider those animals pets and not farm animals?
That-
That's what.
okay, but the
chicken
zoning ordinance,
situation-
the zoning ordinance, is really specific about the animals that are considered agricultural. It's sheep, goats, horses,
Chickens?
chickens. Chickens are considered poultry.
I know, but recently there was a lawsuit, or I forget where, I think it was in PA, and someone won because their chickens are considered pets.
And that's one of the areas that could be disputed, that your zoning ordinance may conflict. Somebody could come along and say it's not agriculture, notwithstanding what your zoning ordinance says. I keep my chicken as a pet. And then that then triggers a dispute that would need to be resolved one way, shape, or form, usually through the zoning hearing board context with a right to appeal to the Court of Common Pleas. So beyond the use itself and whether something is accessory to residential or not, or whether something is a domestic pet or agricultural in nature, is the fact that a lot of times those kinds of animals require some sort of structure or something in the yard, side yard, rear yard, that I think a comprehensive update of your ordinance would address. So for example, chicken coops, hen houses, it's bees, you've got the bee hives themselves. So there are accessory structures, or arguably accessory structures, that you may want to, if you want to encourage that kind of use of the property, you want to expressly permit those kinds of structures, because they could, through an unintended consequence of your ordinance, run afoul of the setback requirement that would be, that you don't really intend to apply. So I think the question is, do you want to encourage or at least allow certain non-traditional animals to be permitted in the residential zoning district, and if so, what are the conditions that you want to allow such use so that it doesn't interfere with neighbors? And I was telling Terry before the meeting started, I got an actual real-life example just late last week filed on a zoning appeal in Chester County Court of Common Pleas concerning whether a daycare can or should be able to have 6 chickens, 6 goats. And it's their view they're accessory to the daycare because they're part of their learning module that they're giving to the little kids. The daycare is in a home, it's in a residential neighborhood, and according to the application of the zoning ordinance by the zoning officer, it's not permitted. And so now they're in court fighting over it. So that's a scenario that you don't always think about. Are those kinds of non-traditional pets accessory to a daycare? And I guess the Chester County courts will determine that here in the next few months. So that's really the conversation that you should have if you're inclined to address it at this point. And if not, if you just want to leave your ordinance as is, we just need that direction, we can take it off the agenda.
What was the change for bees here? Refresh our memory, because I brought up about the bees and you were gonna look into maybe distance or.
I think when the conversation came up as an example, I suggested that you look at a model ordinance, and I used Hatfield Borough as a model ordinance because it happened to be an ordinance that I used in presentation recently to the Boroughs Association, the Statewide Boroughs Association. And so that has been circulated to you. It just gives you an example for how they regulate bees, which is becoming more popular for people in residential neighborhoods to have beehives with the sale of honey at the property, which may or may not then be permitted in a residential use, selling to customers driving up to, off-site, almost like a farm stand. And so Joan was kind enough to print it out. I could summarize it for the members of the public here. It essentially requires a registration or a license with the borough if you want to have a beehive, and then that provides the borough with the opportunity to make sure the hive is located in an area that's not going to interfere with people, pedestrians walking down the street or your neighbors. It gives you a maximum number of hives based on square foot of the lot area, so you can't have too many hives on the property. There's hive types, believe it or not. The location of hives in this model ordinance states that hives shall not be located within 10 feet of any side or rear property line. Hives shall not be located within a front yard. Hives shall not be located within 50 feet of a swimming pool or permanently kenneled animal. And that they can be placed in any zoning district in the township. Then there's hive orientation to make sure that the bees are not being directed across your neighbor's property or your swimming pool. Bees will be attracted to the water, apparently. And then there's a nuisance section that would ban the bees if they are involved in multiple bees stinging, attacking, or otherwise molesting others, including pedestrians, bicyclists, or domestic animals, where you can then say that for whatever reason the hive is dangerous to the public. And then it allows for the sale of honey, as long as you're complying with state and federal laws. If you've got a hive, you can then sell, notwithstanding any other zoning ordinance to the regulations to the contrary. That's just an example where it's easy to say, in your mind, we want people to have beehives if they want them, and they're not bothering anybody else, but the key is to capture that intent in writing, so that your intent is actually implemented, so that it's permitted.
See, I thought we came to a conclusion a meeting or two ago that currently we don't have anything to stop someone like Brian from having a chicken,
Well,
right?
Yeah.
it
That's
actually,
what we thought.
yeah, that, and I probably misspoke at that point. The ordinance does not allow for farm animals other than in an agricultural use. So, you know, in the R5 or R6, and actually R3, 4, they wouldn't be permitted.
Yeah, that's what I thought
Yeah.
from, reading the ordinance.
Yeah, but in that meeting, I thought you said there was nothing stopping them.
Well,
And that's when we
okay.
said, okay, we're looking to make more restrictions than not allow people.
Yeah,
to-
and I think I misspoke.
Yeah, but honestly, I'm not concerned about how many animals somebody has, where they have them, as long as they're keeping them responsibly and not creating a nuisance for their neighbor. So even if you have 2 acres and 2 horses, here we're putting down, you have to have 5 acres, I think it says, for a certain amount of weight. And here's the other thing that concerns me, they gotta apply for a permit to keep any of these animals, even the chicken, you know what I mean? I don't wanna go to, that extreme, you wanna keep a couple chickens, you have an acre or 2, we shouldn't have to get a permit for that.
And I guess my question is, how do you control it?
When you have a problem.
But when,
So there should be rules, as a good citizen in the community, you can have animals like dogs that are a total nuisance to the neighborhood because you don't keep them on your property, properly maintain them, you know what I mean? It doesn't have to be a farm animal that can be a problem. So we ought to just address the keeping of any animal, as far as it has to be under your control, kept on your property, where it's not invited on your neighbor's property, it shouldn't be there. We should have rules and penalties for not being a good neighbor, basically. Cause I'm pretty sure there are people in Mountaineer Village that have horses, and they probably don't have much more than 2 acres. But no one would know they have horses unless you possibly hear a horse make a noise when you drive by or see them, but I could be wrong, they could have 5 acres or more, I don't know. But most of those homes in there have like 2 acres. But I think there's one guy that has like 70 of one back lot. But my concern is, are the animals being cared for properly, where they're not creating a nuisance for the community? More so than how many have, get a permit, will come out and authorize, or,
But I think this applies more to, for instance, I'll use Valley Ponds. I wouldn't want somebody in Valley Ponds to fence in their backyard for 2 horses back there, because they have the right.
Well, they
That's
don't
a
need to
little
get a permit
excessive.
for the fence, but.
That would be excessive, so this would eliminate that. So at some point, you have to draw the line on, you know what I mean, on what laws you make and how you apply them. I guess you can't not have any laws and then all of a sudden throw the law with somebody when they don't meet your standards. So you have to make, that's kind of what this is.
I think we got nonsense.
They're buying on,
Okay, those condos are counties.
Right.
I don't even think they own their land, they just own the building.
I'm just saying, that would be, I wouldn't wanna live in there and my neighbor have 2 horses in the back.
Yeah, but their HOA would never allow it.
No.
They're not even, I think, allowed to let their dog go out to the bathroom without picking it up.
This ordinance is based on having less than 5 acres, correct?
yes, and anything over 5 acres.
That's a whole different category.
Yes, right. It's really geared for the developments, in town,
I understand, yes.
that kind of thing.
It wouldn't apply to R2, R1, the bigger?
It would apply to the smaller properties in R2,
Okay.
okay? You know,
This is not by zoning, it's by size of property,
it's by size of property.
in all zones.
it'll, any residential property, anywhere. It could be in the C1 of residential property in the C1.
And like this permit, when you wanna purchase another goat or a rabbit, you gotta get another permit, cause you gotta check the weight of all those animals.
There, that's the way this is set up. Now, if you want to alter that, that's fine. That's,
But on the other side of that, if there is a nuisance call, and let's say there's 5 nuisance calls for the same residence, who's gonna pay that if we don't have a permit up front? Who covers that cost? So every resident in our township have to pay for one family to have constant nuisance? So if we do that permit, the permit's essentially will offset the cost of the nuisance.
The fine should pay for the cost of those things.
but if they're allowed, and that's the tricky part. I mean, you gotta, if you don't have the requirements, or if you don't establish the standard, then you can't enforce it. Yeah,
Yeah,
there's
but
nothing
the
to
standard
enforce.
is, your chicken shouldn't be in my garden tearing out my food, my vegetables, or your goat shouldn't be rooting out my flower bed,
But that, okay, but that, if there's nothing the township does, that becomes a civil matter between the two parties. And they would take that to the DJ. Okay, but that, there's nothing the township, if the township doesn't have any regulations, then the township can't help them.
That's what I'm saying, we should have regulations on keeping your animals under control and on your property. Not, okay, you're allowed this many animals on this much acreage, you know what I mean? And a permit for everything, and you would have to hire somebody to go out and weigh everyone's animals.
Let's clarify, how much is the permit?
$70. And now, there again, you could set a different fee for that. I can tell you in Lower Alces Township, the permit fee for, the initial permit fee to have chickens is $25, and then it's a $10 annual permit fee.
I mean, I think we have so few people that are bad neighbors and allow their animals to be run wild. I mean, I know there were people over the years in town that had goats that would go to their neighbors and tear stuff up, and chickens, I think. But it was like one guy or two over the last 20 years.
And again, I think you want to be really careful. Is a rooster a chicken? Think about that. In town here, somebody has a rooster. You're gonna get all kinds of complaints really, really fast.
I mean, I guess the debate is at the level, do we need specific regulation by animal, or just something more
That's
general?
pretty much go back down.
Anything that you want to enforce would need to be specific. You know, it would need to be specific, and so the purpose of what's in your hands here is that it really is a list of what you think would be a nuisance. So what is the examples, the best that you're able to articulate in law? What are those examples of nuisances that you would like to prohibit? So for example, this one says all permitted accessory activities and uses shall be confined within the rear yard and shall be located a minimum of 10 feet from the property line. So that's a regulation that is attempting to ensure that whatever somebody has in terms of an animal isn't interfering with their neighbor. And so the objective rule that you impose, that you can enforce, is it's gotta be in the rear yard, and has gotta be at least 10 feet away from the property line, or chicken coop, or whatever the case might be. And so that is your effort at
Why does it have to be in
obtaining.
the rear yard?
Well, that's the question that we're asking, is that the presumption is that if you're allowing, unique kinds of domestic animals in the front yard, it's more likely to constitute a nuisance to passerbys, bus stops, kids, et cetera, et cetera. If you disagree with that, that's a policy determination, you don't need to have that, or you can allow the accessories in the front yard. You don't like 10 feet, maybe you like it 5 feet, maybe you want it 25 feet. So that's what the goal here in any regulation that you adopt is to try to articulate in objective standards and criteria what constitutes a nuisance and what doesn't constitute a nuisance. Because if it's not objectively here in writing, there's gonna be little chance that if there's a problem that you can turn to Terry or me to enforce it, we won't be able to, that's what we're telling you.
And remember, we're not discussing someone that has 10 acres and a chicken monitor in the front yard. We're talking about back behind the police department, where their front yard is a third of the size of this room, and they're raising chickens there, or pigs, or sheep, or goats. I think that's why it refers to rear yard.
Yeah, you don't want people.
Because in town settings, the rear is larger than the front, as far as yours.
Like in Mountain Village, a lot of those homes sit further back in the lot,
But those
and
homes
from
are-
the street, you can't even see their home. You know,
True.
so they could have something in front of the home. I think where this came up before was, by our ordinance, they couldn't have a garage or a accessory structure in the front yard. But because, you know, the front yard's where they had the space for it, they had to get a, what do they call it, variance?
Variance, yeah.
And it cost them, what, $800 probably? Yeah, to use their property like it should have been able to be used from, you know, the zoning. A reasonable use is what I'm saying, they had to pay extra to use their property.
So what if we just put in there, if your front yard is larger than your rear yard?
Or if your lot size is under a half an acre,
Yeah, doesn't matter.
yeah, whatever it is.
No, this goes by pounds of animals per acre.
No, or if your front yard is, yeah, less than
Oh,
however many
property.
feet from the road. I think that's probably just more to keep, you know, a residential neighborhood where you got, you know, a small front yard that's right up against the sidewalk, you don't want, you know, people have to take their food from
Yeah,
the, you know, goat pen out on the front yard.
but,
But, you know, but if you have,
That
like you're
would-
saying, if you have 2 acres and your house is all the way in the back of it, you
Yeah.
should be able to put stuff in your.
especially when you can't see in there because there's woods, you know,
Right.
between the road and your property, and your home.
On the B part of it, we have a paragraph in this for honeybees. Would that get replaced with this or
Could.
something similar to this?
Yeah, it could.
It could, or it could be in addition to.
Yeah, originally when we started looking at this, we were mostly just looking for chickens. That was the
Right,
question.
and the B ordinance isn't a zoning ordinance, it applies municipal wide, it's in their animal code. So it would not, any appeal would not go to the hearing board in that case, it would be strictly a code enforcement matter that would go to the DJ. So that's a consideration too, on whether you wanna keep it in a zoning ordinance, or whether you want a standalone we call them nuisance ordinances, essentially to regulate animals, all the different various kinds. You notice that in this borough, this is part 4B, so they've got 3 other parts regulating other kinds of animals.
Was this based on some type of problem or concern about the number of people that had them?
In Hatfield, I believe it was, I believe that there was some public reports that there was an issue in that, and this is how they resolved it. So it was done just a couple years ago.
doing a responsible job, we wouldn't even know, to be honest with you.
I think it is becoming more like a hobby, beekeeping.
And that's what I'm saying though, responsible owners of anything, you don't even know they have them. You know what I mean, they're responsible. So it's when they do something that offends others that you have to address that. But to have, you know, an arbitrary number or everything, just an arbitrary number of what we think might be a good setback or requirement, there's always gonna be exceptions to the rule. We'll
I
never
think
think
that-
of everything.
I think you're, like, if you have a reasonable, like, regulation, you know, like a limit to the amount of animals per acre, whatever, I don't think that's gonna necessarily impact the responsible owner that much. It's the one that wants to, the person that wants to have like 35 chickens in their, quarter acre backyard,
Cause now the responsible owner has to get a permit.
Well, yeah, that's true.
And let the government into his business.
But then without something written specific, it's not enforceable, so it's like,
Right.
you kinda,
But it would be enforceable if somebody's, if your animal's doing damage or harm or creating a nuisance to your neighbor. If we had a ordinance against that, then it would be enforceable. But we have to define what the harm
Well,
is.
then we would just not do anything and keep it the way it is right now, which would fall under nuisance. We have a nuisance.
But then you still don't
ordinance.
have a provision for people in residential neighborhoods that wanna have, like, that just wanna keep a couple chickens or whatever, I mean, or even,
well, it could, it becomes a nuisance, right?
no, because in the ordinance now it defines, I think chickens as livestock, or,
Right.
then you can't have it, so.
Right.
As it stands now, you can't have, it unless you have,
Right.
what, the R1 and R2, you said, right?
Yeah, R1, R2, and EAP.
What's EAP?
Agricultural preservation.
And the R1 and R2 are like, what is the lot size of this,
Uh,
5 to 10 acres?
yeah,
R2's down to
no,
those two, I
actually,
think.
the R2 is just under 2 acres.
Okay.
I believe it's like 80,000 square feet. I don't remember what the R1 is at the top of my head.
And it's allowed there, so then really all we're worried about is less than 2 acres. Not even less
Actually,
than
the
5
people
acres.
that were questioning it, like you, were less than 1 acre. Like Northern Circle. I
Honestly,
think.
that's what I'd say, anything under 2 acres.
Yeah, well,
Because anything over 2 acres, we already regulate.
right, it's already in there, it's
So
already.
anything under 2 acres,
Right.
we need to regulate, no more than 3 chickens, no,
Right,
whatever, whatever,
and then just leave the others, and you could just leave the other stuff untouched.
right. Because it's really under 2 acres is where the problem would occur,
Right.
more likely to occur.
Or you could make it under whatever the R2 is, if it's 80,000 square feet, you make it less than 80,000 square feet. So that
Right.
you don't screw up the people that.
So that R2 already.
Yeah, it's already left, it's left as it is.
Not rebuilding America.
Right. Right.
Do you believe
That has a
those,
permit.
do you believe those people need a permit, or if they follow the rules?
Oh, well, that's, I guess, another question, yeah, I don't know.
You wouldn't have to have a permit. But then you have no way of knowing who has what until something
there's a-
happens.
Yeah, I don't think you need to have, I don't think it's necessary to have a permit, but as long as there's a way to go back and enforce it later.
So if you don't have a permit, which is actually better, then you have to have a fine that comes in succession with being called to your house for nuisance.
Okay.
Because I don't want 4,000 residents paying for the one resident who can't keep their animals on their property.
Yeah, well, at least that way, then you're only, penalizing the person that
Right.
doesn't take care of it.
That is the
The
problem.
responsible owner can still just go out and if he wants to get a couple.
So no
chickens.
permits, but we'll make a fine schedule that goes to
Okay.
the person who gets called.
Alright.
And do we already have a fine schedule that we can use? or base it off of? Like people that don't maintain their properties or whatever?
Just says by the DJ, right?
Yeah, I mean, the fines are usually, almost all, if I remember correctly, the ordinance, the way it's set up, is a fine of up to X number of dollars per day. But that fine is set by the DJ. In other words, he can do any amount up to that max. And whether it be 500 or 200, whatever you wanna set that fine to be, you know, it's typically you put language in that says each day is a separate violation that it
Each
continues up
occurrence
to
is
the notice.
separate, each day is a separate occurrence.
Yeah.
I like the sounds of that better.
Yeah. Good.
That way the person who creates the problem gets to pay for the problem.
Makes sense.
So for these smaller properties, that's where we wanna have the screening and the housing requirement.
Under 80,000 square feet.
Yeah, yeah, whatever the R2 thing is, if it's 80,000.
Right.
Just keep it up, anything less than that.
And then the rest can follow suit with pretty much what's on there as far as pounds per acre.
Yeah,
blah, blah,
right.
blah.
Yeah, I think this is,
I like the B thing. I just asked you to explain that so everybody in the audience can hear. But, you know, I like the principle on that as well.
So like if you had a quarter acre, we might have discussed this before, about how many chickens could you have based on that pound limitation?
Quarter acre?
yeah, 50 pounds per acre, that's 12 and a half pounds per quarter acre.
Yeah, that's two,
4 chickens, no?
no, actually,
It's about 3
typically,
chickens.
typically you say 5 pounds per bird. So
So I'm gonna make,
it gives you 2 to 3.
we can make it 80 pounds per acre, then we can have 4 chickens
Well, I mean,
on a quarter acre.
let's not split hairs. We'll just leave it at 50 pounds per acre.
I mean, if the birds.
Are they actually gonna carry a scale out and say, okay?
I don't know.
Exactly. I mean, that's not.
It's the reasonable
Pluck
thing.
a couple feathers out.
What would a
of it.
reasonable man do? What would a reasonable pet owner, what would a reasonable chicken weigh? It's the reasonable theory.
The people that are gonna get in trouble are
Unreasonable
the
chicken
reasonable
thing.
people though.
Well, then they're gonna get an unreasonable fine.
We determine if chickens are reasonable.
So, okay, and we're gonna allow hogs and swine on those small acres?
We don't have
They'd
You
be
don't
allowed
have to.
They'd be allowed to have a 50-pound hog.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Well, okay.
They potbelly pig when they're
Yeah,
little.
okay, when they're little, but as soon as it gets to,
50 pounds.
or, well, okay, then at some point, it's gonna become a nuisance. And somebody's gonna complain about it, and then we get a violation.
You're gonna get a fine. You know that as soon as you buy that pig. If it reaches 51 pounds, you're gonna get in trouble. Reasonably. But if you're a good pet owner and your pig never causes a problem for your neighbors, who's gonna know? If it does cause a problem, you're gonna get a fine. Every time.
What if your neighbor's just unreasonable and doesn't like you?
Well, you're gonna get in trouble because you know you're not supposed to have a pig over 50 pounds. That's simple.
How long does it take for those pigs to achieve 50 pounds? I always see them little and cute, they're probably 10, 15 pounds. but-
About 8 months.
Yeah, I think it depends on how much, I think they keep them small by actually not feeding them.
Serious?
Yeah, I think it's actually not a good thing.
My daughter has goldfish, she got at the carnival.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway,
This thing's this big.
Oh my gosh.
I never had one survive more than a week or so, except
Yeah.
for that guy, he's like 4 or 5 years old.
Oh my gosh.
But, I mean, we could rewrite this till the cow jumps over the moon.
Well,
But we gotta stop somewhere,
Yeah,
and just
let me
make
redraft
make
it. Yeah, let me
Reasonable.
redraft this and, send it out, and,
So it's the 80,000 square feet and smaller lots, and we're gonna have these weights basically as the guideline.
right.
Okay.
I would definitely recommend keeping item B in, where it prohibits roosters,
Yeah.
peacocks.
Oh,
and
yeah.
guineas.
Absolutely.
Okay, I
Or a
just,
small lot like that,
Wait, so wait,
yeah.
explain what is the problem with guinea hens again? They make too much noise?
they
They're
are,
loud.
yes,
Okay, yeah, I didn't know.
they're as nasty as peacocks.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
If not worse,
You ever
there's
hear
more
of
than
peacock?
three.
Oh, yeah, peacocks, yeah, but guinea hens just.
My neighbor has one of them, I never knew what it was, cause his house is in the woods or off the road. But when you're driving at night, you would hear this thing, it sounded like a baboon meowing or
Oh,
something, I
really?
didn't know what it was. Here's a peacock.
Yeah, the guinea hens, they eat a lot of ticks. So
They do.
People like to have them
I-
on wood.
Right.
They are
but
very,
they are-
very loud.
Oh, are they really? Okay. I've never seen them. I mean, I've seen them, but I've never heard of them.
We had them when I was kids, but I don't remember them being loud.
I just remember they were little tiny hens.
Okay. I'll redraft this and send it out.
Thank you.
Do we wanna change the B portion of it, or?
Well,
I'll combine,
It'll
I'll
incorporate
combine the two
stuff.
into
Okay.
one ordinance, and it would be a standalone ordinance rather than part of the zoning.
Yeah. Perfect.
Okay. Plan review chart. Anything on here that,
Looks like XTL is the only one that has, a deadline of June 30th for an extension, so we have a little bit of time there.
You guys hear anything from them?
Not at all. No, I do have to talk to Aristides from Stackhouse Bensinger, because he's working on the, Kidjoy project. So I'll check with him and see if he's heard anything.
You remember that one, right? That's the one where they gotta do the Shiloh Road entrance?
Mm-hmm.
The
Yes.
intersection?
Yeah, that's
And they got a grant, but
Oh, did
they
they?
must have extended it, cause it was only a 2-year grant, wasn't it?
Yeah.
May end again this year.
Hmm.
anything else on there that you, that jumped out or thought needed attention?
Morgantown Apartments got their final approval, so I included this on the agenda, that there's plans in the back of the room. Terry, I don't know if you wanna take one last review, look at it, but it has, their signatures on it and notarized.
Okay.
So, if you all don't mind tonight, there's 6 sets.
Should we wait for Terry to look at it?
Actually, no, I
It's,
already, they sent me a copy, and it's all of the things that they were supposed to fix are fixed, so
Okay.
it's good.
I think the last one was changing the ownership,
Right.
and that was done, so.
Future projects, you had an ordinance codification on there.
Yeah, we keep that on there, keep it on the forefront of our minds, with some money coming from the federal government because of COVID. I'm thinking maybe perhaps the board of supervisors would take a recommendation to use some of that for codification, because it means that all your ordinances would be online, easy access for people, not having to come in and get hard copies. So you could probably easily justify, it might be the, 10 to 15 grand for that.
Mhm.
Depending
That's what we talked about prior to COVID, so I can only imagine it'd be that or more now.
I would think it might be between 15 to 20.
Once it's done, to update it, it won't take much, right? Like,
One-
we're looking
correct.
at changing a lot of zoning over the next year.
Right.
Changing it won't take much. once we get it adopted, once we get it codified, it'll be fine.
Well, it'll take whoever does it a while to do it. So, you know, if some of those changes do happen, they can pick that up. And they can always hold zoning out to the end if they know that there are changes in the works.
Can they only handle zoning? Like,
No, they do, all of your ordinance
Everything.
is into one book. Yeah,
okay, cause I mean, we recently had a situation where we found out that we didn't have the official, like, adoption of the, Parks and Rec.
and some,
And it wasn't right there, she actually had to go digging to find out like what their, you know, assignment was by the supervisors, and nothing, couldn't find anything. So all that would be on the computer and easily indexed and found
yes,
with search.
Yep.
Yeah, that's important.
Any other member comments? I have a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.